All right, let's call this meeting to order. Lisa, do you want to do a roll call for us? Thanks.
Matt Blanchett. Ken Cleveland.
Here.
Rosanna Glenn. Here. Shannon Hughes Brown. Here. Ken Jackson.
Here.
Blaze Messenger.
Here.
John Post.
Here.
Jessica Lamb. Here. Heather Jacobs. Here. Dr. Macri, she's going to be a couple minutes late, but she will be coming. Ms. Cochiolo? Here. Mr. Latundra? Chris Cycley?
Here.
Karen DePersia? Here. Roger LaFleur? Jim Giuliano? Randy Fiore? Jeff Wazensky?
Here.
Eddie Wadowski?
Here.
Antonia Civarelli? Is Ira Yellen here too? He said he might be coming. He might be coming. Okay. Alan Spots. Anthony Salvatore. Selena Kelleher. Here. Catherine Russ. Lori Cantwell. Kelly Collier. Here. Kelly Franklin. Here. Jen Lamberson. Dipsy Post. Alan Schumann.
Here.
Matt Zabrowski.
Here.
Do you have any members, before I read everybody, for town council? And anyone for the board of finance here?
Double duty.
No, double duty, that's true, that's true. And if anyone I missed? Okay. I got this, yes.
All right, first up, approval of agenda. There is one change to the agenda I want to make. We will not be doing the approval of our building committee charter, section 8. There were some last minute conversation edits around the charter, which are now called our bylaws, by the way. So I'm going to scratch that off the list to be tabled. We need to get the town attorney to review it first, and town manager Tony Salvatore to review it first before we can bring it to this committee for approval. So other than that, I have no other changes. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with that change?
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda approved with the change to section 8. Okay. Next up, approval of minutes and motions from our March 10th meeting. That should say March 10th. Are any comments to the minutes from last meeting? I think the section D under the meeting schedule, we made that change to May, that's right, okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Anyone second it?
Second.
Any last minute comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Okay. We have a nice agenda today, a very exciting one. I know I'm excited about everything we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into it, though, we do have an opportunity for public comments. So is there anyone out there who would like to make any comments at this time? Please step forward. Going once, twice. Okay, no comments. New business. So we had a bunch of meetings since the last committee meeting that I just want to go quickly over. On March 14th, we had an ed spec review. We had that here at the middle school. It was an action that was taken from our last meeting to go review it, make sure that we were all aligned as to what we wanted in the ed spec. We had CSG present, Dr. Macri, Carrie McLean was there, and some other, Mrs. Cochula, all these, and everyone else present there. So we had good discussion. Narrowed down the requirements, made some amendments. Those changes will be provided to the Board of Ed after the building committee reviews them for approval. We understand that they need to be approved by the Board of Ed before we can actually bring it to the grant committee. So that will be coming in the next few weeks. Some of the things we discussed last time that got clarified. The amphitheater will be outdoors. That would be a change in the spec. We talked about the square footage of the room. There was a question, Karen, about that came this week, the 790 square foot requirement. If we go into the state website, the state building, the what? OSG. Thank you. They had on their worksheet 900 square feet for classroom size. So we're trying to understand where the disconnect is between the 790 and the 900 square feet. Do you have that information on top of your head?
Where did you see it, in like a memo or?
It's on their website. It was in their, the worksheet that they provide for people to fill out when you're trying to assess the size of your school. And it was also in one of their many documents that talked about their suggested guidelines for school classroom sizes.
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversation around that 900 square feet classroom size. But it doesn't work when you go to put the rest of the building together. The classrooms end up being too big. You end up having extra square footage there, but you end up losing it in your circulation space in other areas. So when we go to do the maximum eligible, or maximum allowable square footage, that's just given based on the population of the enrollment. It's hard to marry the two. The 900 square feet plus the allowable square footage.
Okay, so the recommendation is 900 square feet, but we're saying we don't have enough square feet allowable to get us to that point. Okay. I think that was the two major points that we talked about, and the circulation space is still undersized. That'll be something that we'll have to figure out as we move forward. On March 17th, we had a meeting. It was with CSG, Director of Finance, Marianne Sylvester, Town Manager, Tony Salvatore, Matt Blanchett, myself, and Enza were there. And we basically talked about the timeline, the things that had to happen, basically the proper structure of what has to happen between now and referendum. We clarified the timeline. We got all these dates that are actually the timeline I handed out to everyone. Pretty much encompasses that, as well as the timeline from CSG encompasses the same information. So.
Can I ask a question on it? Or was there a conscious change for the May 11th town council to not label that as an approval meeting? Is that yeah? Because I think we were targeting the May 11th to where the town council would approve and then therefore set the special town meeting, and then on the 26th of May we'd go to the Board of Finance for approval there.
So they have a May 11th meeting on the schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying it's not listed as an actual approval point?
Right. Did that change, or no, I mean, there still needs to be, that would be the town council approval.
Yeah, we still have to have the town council.
Okay.
They're not approving anything, though. They're just setting the special town meeting at that point, based on the assumption that the Board of Finance will do their approval on the
I see.
26th.
Okay.
And then we're gonna try to get that special town meeting either on the 1st or 2nd of June,
Yeah.
with the goal of having the referendum either 8th or 9th. The goal there is to have it before graduation, which is June 10th, because that's when everyone's going to skedaddle. I did ask about polling fees. The town basically covers that. That won't come out of any Board of Ed budget for if we go to referendum. And then the last meeting we had was on March 18th. That was with Tall Timbers, ERA, CSG, Shannon, Jessica, myself were on that call, along with Dr. Macri. And we basically spoke about the communication plan that Tall Timbers provided. We should have all had a copy of that to review. There was a question about budget for the building committee. We do not have a budget. I brought the question up with Mary Ann, and she's unaware of a committee's having a budget, so we'll have to look into that a little bit further to figure out how much we would actually need and where that money would come from. And the last thing I wanted to bring up, I kind of alluded to it earlier with the agenda change. The previously called charter, we can't use the terminology charter, it has to be called the bylaws. I need to update the bylaws to clarify that we are basically responsible to the town council. So just some verbiage change in there to make that clear. That is with Tony Salvatore right now and the town lawyer for review. Once we get their approval, we can then bring it to this board for final approval. And that is all I had for my updates. Any questions? Okay, well, the moment we've all been waiting for, our Tecton presentation. Very exciting.
No pressure to have to perform here, huh? Hello? All right, good. That should work. All right.
Nope. That thing rolls, you can roll TV over.
There we go. Thank you. All right, so. Okay, so going to advance. There we go. All right, so we have 3 different options to show you tonight, 2 of which you're expecting. A third is a different one than we've talked about, but we felt it's probably not an option we would recommend you go with, but we want you to see so we can at least prove that we've done our due diligence properly. Start off just to kind of a quick snapshot of the building. What we'll do is take you through the 3 different options, show you floor plans, site plans, talk about some of the benefits, the challenges of each, and we'll end with some preliminary cost estimates so you can see kind of what the difference in the dollar value is overall and what the responsibility is to Cromwell. So first off, just to kind of I think everybody's fairly aware of this, but the building, as you can see, was constructed over many different iterations. The original building was from 54. The second classroom wing was added only 2 years later. In 1979, I'm sorry, 62, there was a small addition on the west side, so the red area that you see. And then when the school was converted from a high school to a middle school in 79, there were a series, you can see several additions put in green, little pockets here and there, the majority of that being the classroom wing up at the north end of the building connecting the two legs. And then the last vintage being the modular classroom buildings that were added about 20 years ago or so. So a lot of the jigs and jogs and the troubles that you're having, the pushes are coming from the fact that the building has just been added onto and added onto and added onto. So any renovation is going to have to get into understanding all of the various different structural systems, mechanical systems, architectural systems. It's a smattering of things. So just so everybody understands kind of what the table is that's being set.
Oh, one thing, Eddie, I want to
Yeah,
mention
please.
while we're on this slide, and hopefully there's no feedback here, is in the OSCGNR guidelines, if a building's built pre-1950, you're allowed an area increase of approximately 25%. So you just miss it, in your 1954. The reason why I pointed it out is because it'll come into play when you start looking at it as renovate as new, options. It's a bit challenging to make an existing building footprint, efficient with things like we talked about at the last meeting, 12-foot white corridors, things like that. So I think it's important to point that out on this slide.
Thank you. Glad you did. Okay, so this is the first option. Again, this is probably not where we're headed, but we wanted to take a look at the possibility of what if we just renovated the existing building, and because square footage wise, we know it's essentially pretty close to what the state is telling us is the maximum allowable square footage. So in terms of, so each of the three schemes, you'll start off with, kind of a benefits and challenges here. And you can see there's only a few benefits here. One is that it's the least disruptive to the site and circulation. You'd be able to kind of keep things essentially, fields, parking would remain essentially where they are. For the most part, it's avoiding new structural work. You're using existing foundations, structural shell, roof construction. The challenges here is that it's a very long overall construction. It's got multiple phases. What we're kind of looking at is probably having to get essentially 8 classrooms in modulars, and so the different areas you see, the 6 sections that are highlighted here are all representing about 8 classrooms worth of space, either the classrooms themselves or an equivalent square footage. And so you're kind of renovating that section, moving students back and forth, and what happens is that 6 phases, roughly about 4 months each, you're looking at about probably 2 years or so to renovate the existing spaces.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep, please.
So this is keeping the layout like exactly the same, just
Set-
updating those spaces?
In terms of the footprint, yeah. There would be, you could do renovations inside, obviously taking down interior partitions, changing configuration, particularly, places like the admin areas or the nurse, things like that would certainly be candidates for it. But again, just because there's no swing space, so every space is being used, you have to move people places to renovate it.
So those 6 phases at 4 months each are really just the colored areas on this footprint.
Correct. Right. So the next piece is the remainder of it, which is the assembly spaces. Those are, classroom spaces are a little easier to put into a modular. What happens for the assembly spaces? What would probably happen is it would be something like the library might move over, and then you do kind of a shuffling around to where you'd have to put, the auditorium would be a gym for a while, and then it would be a cafeteria for a while. So you're kind of playing this shuffle domino effect. Again, we're not suggesting to you this is what we want to do, but for anybody that says, well, how come you didn't look at renovating the existing school as is? We want to be able to show that this is what it would look like, and this is what the hardships would be.
I just want to add one thing. One other hardship we should consider is that there is going to be hazardous materials in here. And if we have kids occupied in the school while we're abating other parts, that's not ideal.
Absolutely. I mean, no matter what, whether we take the building down or whether we renovate it, we still have to, as you know, we have to do the abatement, but obviously it's a little easier when you've built a new building and everybody's in the new building and you take it down. It's also easier to abate because it's all bulk demolition as opposed to selective demolition.
I think that's a great point. Another interesting point on this option is you're gonna pay a lot for building temporary walls, taking them down, building temporary walls, taking them down. So you're gonna put a fair amount of dollars into work that isn't gonna stay in the building. So it's some of the realities with renovations of existing buildings. So just kind of keep that in mind as we move through this option and the next one, the renovate is new, with the larger addition.
Yep, and as we get to the end, when we get to the costs, you'll start to see some of those line items, the premium for the abatement, the premium for the temporary space.
When you mentioned the portable classrooms, those would be like kind of what we have outside now. That's not really secure. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, temporary modulars, they'd have to have ADA access, they'd have to, we probably wouldn't do plumbing, but they'd have power, data, those kinds of things, and a ramp to them. And they'd be installed for, at a minimum, the 24 months to get you through the classrooms. I think we sized it out on the, I think
Yeah,
it was
we kind of
8.
assumed, again, I was kind of figuring that, somehow or other, we've got to build in some swing space for the assembly, so even if it was something like the library, so we figured having it, and you'll see this, the next bullet is, again, 4 more phases, roughly about 3 months each, so another year, so we're talking about a 3-year period, and looking at having those temporary classrooms for the entire duration, and having to find somewhere on the site to put them, it's not ideal.
So just to recap, the program, as per the ed spec, is $83,313. Your building, as it exists today, is $83,060. So like, you're using all of your building. So there's no place, when we walked around, we were asking, we were prodding, is there a place to shift, students around? You're using every square inch of this place, so.
With the modulars, I don't know if this is a district question, but if they're not secure to use now, why would they be secure to use during a reno?
So I think someone please correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the security issues are probably due to just the physical condition of them being 20 years old and. Right.
You would do temporary modulars?
Right, oh, I'm sorry. So it's not to reuse the ones that are there.
No.
No, but
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was safety, security-wise, that we couldn't use them, or strictly because they were old.
Right, it was, my understanding is both, but I could have Ian Cochiola talk about it, because I wasn't here.
I
It's definitely
I was here, and it was shut down after Sandy Hook
Okay.
for security purposes. That was the original reason, and then they eventually decayed, and now they're not safe. But that was the original reason, because the kids, my son loved it. He ran out in the rain to go to that class. But, yeah, the kids are exposed, and it's exposed to, the general public. So that was the original concern.
And they're not secured into the building. They're kind of their own entity, so there's not a tie into the building. So that also makes it a challenge safety-wise, because there's no way, you have to do any sort of lockdown or whatever. You have to bring the kids back into the building, because they're not, those structures are separate from the main building.
If we added modulars, would they be connected to the building?
Yes.
Okay, so from a safety standpoint, not a structural safety, but like student safety, would they be safe?
Yeah, I mean, they would still be physically connected, yes, absolutely.
My
Yeah,
experience
these-
with modulars of 20 years ago versus 3
The-
years ago is very different.
Yeah, they've come obviously a long way, and getting something that's new as opposed to something that's been sitting out there for 20 years makes a big difference.
Right, and there's also a difference between, these would be temporary modulars that would come in, they would set up, and then they'd be taken away after those 36 months or whatever the time frame is. So they're a little different than what you have out there today.
Okay.
But we could address the concerns of the committee. It is one of the challenges with this option. And I believe, and I think CSG can correct us if we're wrong, that modulars are not a reimbursable expense. So that's another piece to consider, and you'll see that in the kind of the
List.
cost analysis.
Right, exactly. So when we get to those spreadsheets, you'll see the difference between option 1 and 2, because 1 is the only one we're going to show you tonight that involves the use of modulars. The difference, even though there's a difference in the total cost, it's not much of a difference on the cost to Cromwell, because knowing that piece would not be reimbursable.
Okay.
Is the abatement a reimbursable expense, or is
Yes.
that a separate, it is part of it? Okay.
Yes.
Just quickly, I'll remind everyone to turn your microphones on when you're talking so we can record everyone's comments and questions.
And then with this option, meet the ed spec requirements in terms of having the STEM facilities built, the size of the classrooms being, I don't know, was it like roughly 790 was our goal, or are we just talking kind of new paint, new floors, maybe some technology, some HVAC, all the
No, I
critical
think we would
systems?
still be, the intent was still be to meet the ed spec requirements. I mean, the
Okay.
classroom sizes, I believe, are pretty close to what the requirements are in the ed spec, so it would be a matter of really trying to, knock down walls in other areas to create the spaces that are needed. But as we talked about before, and I don't know, Matt, I know you missed the last one, you may not have been part of this conversation, but, one of the issues we saw was that, the corridors in the original 2 classroom wings are 12 feet wide, plus lockers beyond that. So you're looking at about a 14-foot piece. So there's a lot of space wasted in circulation that would be, kind of difficult to kind of come back out and recapture for program space if there are bearing walls. Okay. So, Jeff, do you want to
Sure.
for there, and I can drive from here? for
Sure.
2 and
Okay.
3?
So the next option is, as you can see, a bit more extensive as far as the renovate is new. We often like to, through these exercises, and again, these are kind of high-level conceptual plans, kind of test fits, if you will. We like to look at seeing if we can maximize the rules, like we talked about last time, 55% renovate, 45% addition. So when you're done, when you look down, the yellow has to be 55% of the total footprint, and the blue has to be 45%. We're close, in this footprint here, and what we're showing is that in simple form on the site plan anyway, left side is an addition. It's a 2-story, well, it's most of it is 1 story, half of it is 2-story. You'll see in the floor plans when we walk through those. But you would build this piece first, swing the students into there, and then start looking at renovation to the core spaces. Some of the site features are opportunities that you could look at, and we'd have to work through, the proper circulation, where to enter the site, where to exit the site. But you could have a loop road where, if the blue was parent drop, you have plenty of areas for queue. If the orange was bus, you have immediate, right away into the site and proper drop on the bus side. Nice straight drop zone in front of the school, and then ample parking that's kind of dispersed around. If you keep on clicking, we'll go through each of the pieces. One of the benefits is we push some of the visitor parking and the bus drop, the approach to the administration suite, to the entry of the building, a little further away, at least 70 feet away, according to school safety infrastructure guidelines. So that's a benefit. The other piece is it gives you a little bit more green space around, that blue addition. You'll see that green buffer there that as we spoke to at the last meeting, the reintroduction of outdoor classrooms, or the reconnection of outdoors through the last few years has really, I think, taken hold and will continue to. So that this option provides that opportunity. As I mentioned, it equally distributes parking around the property. In this particular instance, on the far right, There's two dots there. The central office would take that portion, and you'll see it in the floor plans, would take that portion. So you could kind of compartmentalize the site, if you will, from a parking perspective and from a traffic delivery, that kind of stuff. Again, it's not perfect, but you can at least see the opportunities that exist here. We would temporarily lose the use of that soccer field, but we could recreate it when we're finished, and that's a representation of that. We would turn it, the orientation a bit, but you'd have some pretty good parking for community immediately adjacent to the fields as well. And then lastly, we tried to maintain, and we heard this at our walkthrough, an improved relationship between the athletic portions of the interior of the space with the exterior play fields. So something that we can strive to achieve on this option. As far as the building plan, and I have 11 by 17s, I wanted to kind of walk through these, and we'll leave them with you, kind of study them at your leisure after this, because I know there's a lot of kind of detail and a lot of things to kind of absorb. So I'm going to try to hit the big picture. So if you split that plan in half right down the center, the right side is basically remains, right? So we're keeping, number one, we're keeping our auditorium, we're keeping our gym, we're going to keep our kitchen, servery, cafeteria. We're going to completely renovate them, mechanical, lighting, finishes, all that. But we're going to keep those core spaces. It's most efficient to do that in a renovate as new. Here, next slide. In this particular option, we're suggesting that we possibly relocate we'll call it the media center, the library, learning commons, whatever you'd like to call it. It really wants to live at kind of the heart of the school and be more open, more visible to the students. So we're taking over the space that currently is art and
Music. Oh, no, sorry, art and,
it's STEM.
It's STEM,
The purple's
yeah.
on STEM, and in that center portion, there's a little bit of a grade change there where a ramp. We're going to take all of that space, open it up, make that learning commons. And then we're going to surround that, according to the ed spec, we're going to surround those learning commons with the coding, the STEMs, the art, so that they have that nice relationship. And then the next piece. Relocate central office to the far end of the building, which is, on this plan, is on the east side of the building where there's classrooms now. That meets about I think it's around 5,000 to 6,000 square feet program in their ed spec. So it's close to that number. It could have its own separate entrance. It could have a relationship to, as it does today, to the existing admin area.
it's keeping it essentially on the same end of the building. It's just shifting over.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
When you say central office, you're talking about the central office for the actual middle school. You're not talking about the Board of Ed.
I'm
area.
talking about the Board of Ed.
Oh, you
the-
are talking about Board of Ed.
Yes, the Board of Ed.
Okay.
I wasn't quite sure exactly what to call it, but that orange area, number 4, is the Board of Ed offices. We would remove the smaller portion that you see there and move them into the building. And then the existing administration guidance nurse would be completely renovated to kind of resolve all the ills that exist today, but would remain essentially in the same location. And then the biggest piece, obviously, in this option is creating what we call a learning community, and it's by, what we're trying to do is create learning communities by grade level, where right now your current ed spec has 7 classrooms per grade level, and then 2 science. So you have 9 total classrooms, along with what we're trying to establish is some breakout spaces, and you'll see them in the 11 by 17s, but it's hard to see on the screen. There's purple areas where we push the corridor walls 5 feet in either direction, so that what you see in today's kind of more contemporary learning environments is this project-based learning, so that they can learn in the class, but also in the hallway, and go out and work in smaller groups. So we're trying to establish that in this new addition, and you can see it's a very simple circulation, a U-shaped circulation. I'm just gonna,
Yeah, you're one.
hopefully you can.
Go ahead.
So what we tried to do is we tried to align existing hallways, so you'd oops. I guess I got too close to that. So this part here would be one grade level, this would be another grade level, there's two science for each, there's breakout space on all three sides. There's basically a light well or courtyard, if you will, to make sure that all the educational spaces have direct natural daylight. There's the yellow spaces that you see kind of sprinkled around are all the specialized ed. So we've learned to try to push those into the learning communities as best we can, so they're immediately adjacent to the students where the need is. There's larger spaces like OTPT and the SLC that need larger space. We put those over on the side there. So basically you could do 6, 7, and 8, or whatever kind of structure you want, but that's how kind of this particular addition is arranged. So I think really what we wanted to try to do, and what you want to try to do in middle schools, is make sure that the students can live in their kind of their learning community, their age appropriate grade level, work in teams, and then visit the core spaces without having to obviously travel through another person's neighborhood or learning community. So that's what we strive to try to do here. It's a little forced on the second, floor. It's a little bit clunky right now, but that could be kind of cleaned up a little bit. So that gives you, this plan gives you that 80. It's a little less efficient. It's in the 87,000 square foot range, so it still needs to be squeezed a little bit. But that's kind of the first shot out of the box for renovate as new. There's plenty of other options we could look at. We could leave more of the classroom wings, but what we wanted to show you in this option is that what you would do is you would build this addition first, and then swing all the students around into it, and then renovate or modify the rest of the building.
Would the whole first floor be on one level? 'Cause I know you were mentioning there's a grade outside the gymnasium currently.
Yeah, so what we would do, and you can kind of, we squeezed in some ramps here, so we would make the entire, we kind of level set the addition down to the grade level, which is about 30 inches or so lower than the gym. And then inside we'd have, what we want to do is 1 in 20 ramps, so that you don't need railings and that kind of stuff. So it's a very gentle slope. So to answer your question, this is about 30 inches lower, with ramps kind of strategically located in these two areas here, so that there's universal access to all of the core spaces. We have an elevator, we have 2 stairs. Some of the challenges with this option are, we left the locker rooms, the arrangement, if you're familiar with we walked, I think at the last meeting, it's kind of a split level, so that the challenges related to the locker rooms kind of remain in this particular option, and thank you for reminding.
Yeah,
reminding
since
me.
we had it up here, why not? Sure.
Do you want to go through that?
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah.
We'd have to do a little more exploration. I think there's enough room to turn it and push it up and still maintain it in a temporary fashion until we have enough room to find its permanent location. I would have to understand, the soccer field that's shown there is like high school regulation. I'm not quite sure exactly what it's used for, so we can.
It's currently used for high school and middle school players. It's used for this middle school as well as for the local town travel league.
Okay, all right.
And all the older teams use it. So right now, in the spring, because of lacrosse teams use the high school fields.
Gotcha.
So the high school players and the older youth players use this field.
Okay, all right.
All spring. So that field is used year round.
Okay, so that has to stay at that size. Got
Right,
it.
so if that field disappears for 2 years, it's a huge impact.
Okay.
Because we have other outside people using the fields.
Sure.
So we have to.
Yeah.
The town will lose revenue if we have to boot them up.
Yeah, I think if you rotate it and you slide it, I think there's room there. I'm not sure if I'm asking the right person, but there's a smaller, I think, Little League field
Yeah, I'm just asking that you guys include that into
Yeah,
your considerations.
okay.
If possible, that would be.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
would save a lot of headache.
No, it's a good question, yeah.
The second question I had is that because you're putting the second floor and other stuff, what impact will that have on students moving from classroom to gym or other between classroom times? Will it extend it if so? Will it cause the current staff to have to extend the school day, allow them to travel from A to B? I don't know if the answer is I'm just asking.
Yeah, quite honestly, I think it's more efficient. It's a lesser travel distance. What we tried to do in the scheme is make it as compact as possible with these neighborhood groupings. So I didn't do the actual measurement, but I would believe that that this proposed scheme is gonna lessen travel distances from your classroom space to your core spaces.
So from the second floor to the far side.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep, no, great questions, thanks.
I just want to mention, I do appreciate the questions, but per our committee guidelines, I like to limit the questions to the building committee
Oh,
to
sorry.
save time. That's okay. And any questions from the public that you may have, please feel free to contact me afterwards with your questions, and we'll get answers for you. Thank you.
So yeah, just to kind of wrap up here, talk about, some of the benefits and challenges. Obviously, you see a better ratio of benefits to challenges than on the previous one. Of the schemes, this is going to be really the lowest initial construction cost. The renovate is new, obviously, is going to be a higher reimbursement rate. It's an additional 10% over the new construction. The addition can be built without disruption to students in the existing school. So essentially, we create the swing space ahead of time, eliminating the need for modular classroom buildings. We have good flexibility in terms of 21st century learning because it's a nice mix of both new and existing and an ability to, really rehab what is here. As we've kind of talked about before, there's a lower operating expense with the reduced footprint with going to this partial second story. The challenges on this is, it's going to be a little bit, obviously, longer construction duration as opposed to the next scheme we're going to show you. There are more phases here. So in terms of overall time that there will be disruption to students and staff, it will be longer. And as we mentioned, in terms of the existing building, you're going to have, some additional work, whether it's, the abatement that we talked about, the structural systems, the mechanical systems. Obviously, there are, you start opening walls, you find things, and it gets a little more difficult sometimes to renovate existing.
What is the total time for this renovation option?
We didn't really, so the addition itself, I don't know, what would you think, about a year or so to build the addition?
I think total, this is probably about 30 months. It trims probably about 6 to 8 months off the previous scheme, maybe a little more. It's a difficult construction climate right now as far as, if you were to ask me in a normal, construction environment where you're not waiting, a year and a half or a year for switchgear, this is probably about 30 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or at least we've done similar projects like this in 30 months.
About that time, yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully by the time this gets under construction, things have normalized a little in terms of the supply chain, but no guarantees at this point.
So before we go, can you just jump back
Yeah,
real quick?
sure.
I just want to, so we kind of gave you, renovate what you have and kind of an extreme renovate is new. There's no problem with something in between. We wanted to kind of illustrate some of the challenges of each of those two, and we wanted to show them. So if there's ideas, thoughts, comments, or whatever, it's all on the table. But we wanted to show you both so that you could kind of see what you could do with the existing building.
Right, and the problem with the ratio of classroom to circulation space in the existing was kind of the genesis for why we thought it made sense to keep the assembly spaces, because those are at least are appropriately sized. But, as Jeff said, there are other options that could be studied. All right, ready for the next one?
Okay, so right on cue with the soccer field question. So this one does sit on that exist. So this is a new construction. The site plan represents the final completion of a new build, and it really sits on the soccer field. So knowing those challenges exist, we would have to look at, can it situate on the site a little differently and still maintain that? we certainly can look at that. But let me walk you through this plan, some of the benefits and challenges. The footprint, so it's an all-new building. Obviously, the phase is you build this in probably 18 to 24 months, and you move into it, and you finish the site work. Limited disruption, but some of the things that we wanted to go through, you could see here, we completely separated bus and parent. So if you wanted to have a complete separation, you could, or you could kind of connect them on the lower part of this plan. But this kind of sets up pretty well for again, a similar loop road. What's nice about this, and I know it might be a little painful to get to this spot as far as, construction and phasing, but it does give you good circulation around a community field, good access, good parking, those kinds of things. It puts greenfield, it puts the building further away from the neighbors and gives you kind of a buffer on both sides, both on the east, which is to the right, and on the south, which is to the bottom of the screen, because it pulls parking further away from everybody. You maintain your visibility from the administration suite across the entire site, so you can kind of see who's coming and going. So good site control. You'll see there's a pocket, a recess there, and that's where the media center is, right near 3 there. So it creates a nice opportunity for some outdoor protected learning. Good transparency through the building. We did distribute the parking somewhat evenly, and before we get too far into this, the plan does not currently show the Board of Ed offices anywhere, because I wasn't quite sure with a new build, does it want to be its own or does it want to be attached? We will obviously, after these conversations, we'll work that into the plan. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget about it. We weren't quite sure what the preference was. So anyways, parking across the board. The parking, I should mention, it's around 180. We can probably get 200 parking spaces easily if it's needed. Well, in addition to what you have today.
I thought you had 230 in this. When I
I had 230 and 182. So
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think. So. This is, preserves the soccer field when completed, not during, so we'll have to look at that challenge now and see what we can do. The gymnasium on this plan is on the top right, and has pretty good access to fields. So let's walk through the building.
Can I go back to, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
Does this show the bus loop coming in through that neighborhood from the main road, Deer Street there? Can that be tweaked if possible?
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't have to go through that neighborhood?
Yeah, we could flip these. We could have entry through here and exit through there, or we could have only cars through there. It sets up in either direction for parent or bus, so we can, I guess what I'm saying with the addition of some kind of loop in both of the schemes that we've shown, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to kind of control your traffic on site and get it off the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
Sorry, I can't see if I'm on the.
You're only coming from
There we go.
Okay. Okay, so first floor, second floor. First floor, admin, guidance flank, main entries in the center. Directly in the center of the plan is the media center, learning commons area, the red shaded area. Again, really the core space. This would be open up to all the, different learning communities and all.
Yeah, you can do it if you like.
There we go.
There you are.
So I think the admin place in this particular plan gives you good visibility both on the outside but also inside the building too. So some pretty good view quarters down to each of the grade level. What we did here is we kind of created this main street, if you will, that organizes the building. So and it's basically, for 60-70% of this hallway, it's a story and a half double heighted space, so lots of natural daylight coming through, and programmatically, you have all your kind of community core spaces on the right side of this plan, all your oranges that could be easily separated for community use, and then you have your classrooms and learning communities on the left side. So as I mentioned, what's nice about putting some of the public spaces out front is that they can, somewhat similar to what you have today, but be a little bit cleaner. You have cafeteria, auditorium, stage, gymnasium, all. Again, schools are community buildings that could really leverage the community use if it's arranged in a fashion like this. So I have an enlarged plan so I can kind of show you what's going on in this neighborhood, if you will, this grade level. So there's 3 grade level pods, 7 classrooms. This sets up a little cleaner as far as the organization, 2 science, and then specialized ed. And I think the next slide is gonna zoom in. Okay. So you have basically everything you need in this learning pod, if you will. You have, again, we can kind of rearrange the yellow, but there's specialized ed, small group rooms, sensory room, conference rooms. We have the gender neutral facilities within the neighborhood. We have toilet facilities that stack and are very efficient from floor to floor. And then you see, and I think I thought this might have been a change in the ed spec from last time.
Yeah.
Talking about some flexibility from room to room. So what we're trying to represent with the dotted lines is the ability for these walls to either open up this way or that way, so that you have, kind of a large breakout space. So I think when we walk through the building, there's 2 teams per grade level, so it could kind of be an interesting kind of community kind of center in this arrangement. And then the classroom number 7 could also be used as kind of a flex classroom, if you will, depending on population swings if you need it or don't need it.
That purple breakout space, you're saying that would otherwise be a pass-through hallway, but you can close on the ends and?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's basically about, I believe it's about 20 feet, so it's a pretty good width. And what we're trying to do, and you'll see in more contemporary learning environments, more glazing along these spaces where, whether it's you slide open or you slide up, yes, this becomes a very project-based, very interactive zone. And then you have your more traditional classrooms on the end. So it kind of gives you that built-in flexibility that you see a lot in today's educational environments. Does that answer your question?
In this design with the outdoor classroom, it looks like it's contained within the building, almost like a courtyard.
It is. Yep.
What does that look like? As we were walking through and we were looking at the courtyard here, there were comments of, yeah, it would be nice to use this space, but how do you get a lawnmower in there and like those sorts of things.
Sure.
So how do you maintain an outdoor classroom that's contained
So
inside the building?
This wouldn't be, so yes, there would be no roof on this, and the intent is to have glass, basically to let natural daylight into this main street, if you will. And the reason that we believe that this proportion will work a little better from an educational perspective is that we don't see this as a grass field. We see it as more of kind of a combination of kind of like an atrium, if you will, if you would think of it, except it doesn't have a roof on it. So there's hard surfaces, there's surfaces you can start to see what we're representing here. The gym is on this side, so those are the bleachers. This is hallway, so we set up some kind of benching and seating so that you could take 2 classrooms. If they're giving a presentation, they could come out into this area here. It's a combination of, you want to do certain things kind of in your learning community, but you also want to show, other grade levels what you're working on so that they can learn from each other. So I think there's a combination there's a layering of those types of spaces in this plan. So long story short is we see this more as kind of an atrium-like space, so it's more usable.
Does that count towards the total square footage, or is it?
No.
Okay,
No, it doesn't have a roof.
it doesn't have a roof.
Doesn't have a roof, outdoor
Tricky.
space, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's natural materials, but, ones that are easier to maintain. So it could be, could be stones, it could be, pavers, could be low ground cover that doesn't require mowing, but things that, so you can still have the feel of a natural environment, but without having to drag a lawnmower through the building.
Okay, so the last piece, and it's kind of a subtle piece that you may not pick up, obviously safety, security, huge, school guard glass, all the controls, all the cameras, all those things. We like to look at our buildings, early in the phase in the conceptual design through, a philosophy called CEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. So it's about delay, deter, compartmentalization. So what these lines indicate is the idea that you can compartmentalize as you move further and further back into the building, builds an inherent level of safety, through doors, through, obviously we'll have our, at the main entry, you'll have to enter directly into admin suite and through, but you have these dotted lines are to indicate, as you move through the building, there's kind of another layer that you're gonna have to get through, in your building. So that's a piece that I just wanted to make sure, we build it into all of our designs, but we just wanted to kind of highlight it on this plan. And I think, Eddie, if you want to.
Sure.
The highs and lows.
Yeah, so basically, in terms of the disruption to everyone, obviously, because this is the simplest to phase, in terms of building all the new space, it's the least disruptive to the learning environment while it's going on. It's the shortest construction period, obviously the most flexibility in terms of getting the latest standards for learning spaces, the lowest operating costs with really kind of maximizing that second floor area, and it's because of the condensed footprint, it allows the most opportunities for site development, gives you a little more freedom. The biggest challenge here, of course, you're going to see it's the cost, because the price tag is going to be higher initially in terms of total project cost and then in terms of cost to the district. But we'll take you through what those are.
Just a quick question. Would it be a fair statement to say that in the future, if we had to expand, that we could add another floor on top of that space at the bottom right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. Obviously it could be certainly designed to handle the loads. There's still some sequencing involved in it because obviously you're swinging steel to, build on top of. You don't necessarily really want to do that while the students are occupying the space. Right. So, that would have to be thought through. But yeah, in terms of could you build it in? Yes, you can see the two wings are essentially the same footprint and they stack. So yeah, could you build on top of it for future expansion? Absolutely. Okay. All right, so
the next series, and we'll go through them relatively quickly, is just photos, representing what we see. That's the entry to the facility, to the school, or what it could look like. Go ahead.
Sure.
Some of these learning, these shared breakout spaces filled with natural daylight, they're kind of like they have technology, they have high tops, they have soft seating. There's a ultimate flexibility that lives within those spaces, and typically you want to kind of, it's also exhibit space. You want to kind of show what you're working on. So we've highlighted those there. We talked about the Main Street idea, and I think we try to kind of include this kind of concept in a lot of our projects because it really does create a sense of community around the building. So this is just one project that's currently under construction where it's slightly different grade level, but similar, where you have your media center on your right, you have a multi-purpose on the left, and it's C and B scene kind of mentality. So it really helps to break down some of the social emotional pieces that you see in middle schools. These are other examples of what Main Street, you see the benches and things like that. I think we've shared these. I just wanted to make sure. And then obviously the STEM. So the relationship of the codings, STEM, art to the media center, that relationship's an important one that we'd like to maintain. And these are just, more examples of more contemporary learning learning media centers that have, art look into media, science and STEM looking into art and media, so that there's this kind of interdisciplinary kind of approach to that part of the building. And then we didn't mention, and I know Eddie showed this slide, we located, and whether or not you have a traditional auditorium or a more kind of theater in the round, that kind of provides optimal flexibility for a variety of different uses. We located the CAF and the auditorium adjacent so that if you wanted to have some scalability for larger functions, you could kind of open them up, because that has kind of slowly worked its way out of buildings where you need a space for your entire school. We'd like to try to create a couple different settings for that to occur in this building. So that's where that dot is on the plan.
Can we go back to that?
Sure.
Sure.
Are you saying you create a cafeteria that can be dual use as a gymnasium? Otherwise, you have kind of maybe that main gymnasium is up top.
Yeah, it's not exactly, the
Yeah,
photo's not exactly what I'm trying to indicate. I'm trying to indicate that you can open up two spaces to one another, so you still have your formal gym,
Okay.
which is at 7,300, I believe, or somewhere around that scale. And then you have an auditorium that's around 3,600 with an auditorium. So the auditorium and the cafeteria are together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those-
Right, yeah, this
Spill
is a
into
little
each other,
different.
yeah.
This was a scenario where the cafeteria was essentially about only half the size of a gym, and we had the gym for the other, and it opened up because it was elementary school. It was more for community use for
Yeah.
needing the full court. In this case, yeah, we would have full-size gym, full-size cafeteria, but the idea being that if you needed to have an assembly beyond what you would normally have, for those couple of times a year where you really want to have several hundred people in, you'd be able to open it up and have that flexibility.
Thank you.
I think that's an extra slide. You can
Yeah, I
skip
think
that
so.
one.
We have a few extra slides. All right. Okay, so,
Can I, one more, because
yeah.
I was waiting to the end to see if we have it. Can you go to one of those aerial pictures? What is our actual, I guess, the property lines that fall within the middle school? Because we're on 18 acres, or what's the acreage that we have? What are the borders, I guess?
I
Do
don't
they
know
go
if I know.
around those baseball fields, or is that
yeah,
town
it's
property?
at a minimum, it's here, but it's probably a little further back.
Yeah. We could get that after. I was just more curious.
I've got a question on the second floor. So back to the outdoor space. How do you have outdoor space on the first floor and the second floor in the same location? Or was I missing something on the second floor? I know this isn't the final design, but when you've got the two floors,
It's just on the ground
It's just
floor.
on the ground floor.
Yeah, it's open to below.
in the same location?
So
Or do you have the second floor, the outdoor space is over here, and the second floor it's over here, and it's just,
I think it was probably mislabeled. It should have said open to below. So the
Okay.
top one is really a two-story kind of light well.
open, yep.
Yeah, and you only have the outdoor space on the at grade level.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question and a good catch. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really trying to give you, a little bit of a summary of the three options and kind of green being obviously the best, yellow being kind of in the middle, red being not so good. So you can kind of see, you know, a lot of things, a lot of challenges on that first scheme. A lot of things are improved with option 3 as opposed to the renovate, but of course you can see the cost really being the key contributor. So I won't belabor this too much because we kind of went over some of the pros and cons before. But so take you through, and hopefully, can everybody actually see the text that's up there? No, of course not. That's always the problem with these. Let's see, is there a way to zoom in? There we go. Okay. All right, well, we're going to do this one little tiny bit at a time.
I think you can stretch the box.
Can we stretch the box?
See
Okay.
right there? Yeah.
Oh.
It's like the
Telling you.
reader that you have for your iPhone.
Okay, how's that?
I don't use it.
Okay, so all 3 schemes, and again, these are in the same order that we saw them. So this is the renovate the existing building as it is. All 3 start off with the same demographics. As we're saying, the 491 students, you know, the highest enrollment from the projections. The maximum area allowed, and that's including a 1% bonus for mechanical space that is included in the ed specs. Some recent, or fairly recent, last couple of years legislation the state has. So the maximum area allowed, 83,256. The existing building, this could be potentially a little off. I'm trying to do some scaling from things, but what I got, it was about 84,000. So as you can see, we're, as Jeff mentioned, we're pretty close to existing and proposed being about the same. So putting in cost factors, site improvements. So what we did is I took, you know, the plan that we proposed, took an area, it's about 11.5 acres, the 230 parking spaces. So this is saying, okay, we're going to have the entire 83,256 is all going to be renovated as new. Renovate is new, we're seeing about $385 a square foot. You'll see I put in a premium of 10% because we think that's appropriate to put in because of the phasing, because it's going to have to be an extended, you're going to be mobilizing contractors, plumbing is going to have to come out multiple times, electrical is going to have to come out multiple times, you're going to have to put up temporary partitions and take them down. So there's a little bit, you know, obviously that's above and beyond what would typically happen in a renovate. If you were just, if it was a vacant building and you clear cut it, that's $385. But because it's occupied, because it's phased, there's a premium to it. So demolition of existing, knowing that we have a little bit more square footage than we're permitted. Hazmat abatement, and you'll see that through all of these. We are showing hazmat abatement for all of the existing areas. Again, whether we take the building down or not, the hazmat has to be taken away. No new construction here. Soft costs, that's going to be for fees, permits, design, owner's fees, that sort of thing, furniture, technology. So it's kind of a typical percentage that we see. Let's see, so. Now it's so big I can't even get it to, there we are. All right, and then as you can see, we threw in the lease for the portable classrooms in this scheme. You won't see that cost in the others, but as you can see, it's a fairly sizable expense. It works out to be about $2,500 a month per classroom, so you know, nearly about $750,000 not reimbursable to the district. So total project costs, you know, about 51 million, close to 52. The higher state reimbursement at nearly 50%. Ineligibles, that's for things above and beyond, because no matter what, you usually find something that the state says, you know, that's just not included. So we tend to 4% for ineligibles is a typical factor that we see. So an estimated total cost to Cromwell of about $28.5 million. So I'll take you through the other two first because I think it may be good to see them in relation to each other. Okay. So. As mentioned, this kind of starts off, it's the same numbers here on all three schemes, so I won't bother taking you through that. The schemes, of course, have a little bit of difference in terms of area and parking spaces, but we decided to show you the same 11.2 acres and the same 230 parking spaces and all, so you could really kind of see an apples to apples comparison. So you didn't go, oh, wait, this one's not so bad. Well, it's because there's fewer parking spaces. We wanted to show you kind of a true comparison. So again, you see the 10% premium for the phased work here. This is now, you can see it's a little bit of a mixture of things, the demolition of existing and the hazmat abatement, and I'll point out these two numbers, the 15 and 27, because we're going to take those down a little bit in the next scheme, and I'll explain why. And then $475 a square foot for new construction. Again, you see the same soft costs, no cost for the portable lease. So as you can see, the difference between option 1 and 2 is fairly negligible, at least particularly in terms of what the cost is to the district. You're talking about a difference of less than $1 million between the two, but you're getting a lot more new space, and that's why we really, again, kind of wanted to show you, doing the due diligence, that we looked at option 1, but we're not really saying that we think that that's something worth pursuing. Okay. Let's see. Okay. And the final one. Okay, again, same numbers for totals, same site numbers. In this case, nothing carried for the renovate is new. Now here you can see we knocked down the demolition and the abatement here, figuring that it should be easier, because if you're taking down the whole building, if you're doing it as bulk, it's going to be easier than having somebody selectively remove parts of walls, parts of doors. There's a little bit of savings that should be realized by being able to knock it all down at once and treat it as bulk waste. Everything really here applied to the new construction. Same percentage for soft costs. And so you can see the total project cost is not terribly different between them. Obviously, it's clearly, it's a jump from 30 million to getting close to 37 million. So the question really is, is the benefit of having all new space, does it warrant, what the burden is to the taxpayers? Yes.
Can I ask a question about the total enrollment numbers?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that we can take it, when you look out 8 years, I believe, right? You can take from the highest level of enrollment. When you look at our enrollment, though, that 491 will not ever be in the new school, right? Because that's next year's number. And then we don't go anywhere. The next closest number we get to is 478, and then we start to see it drop off. I understand that maybe for the renovate is new, that's a lot more challenging, right? Because we have this 83,000 square foot building. But I was curious if in the new building, if that's something that's worth exploring or thinking about, and if that would, make a difference to the price if that square footage comes down because of that student number.
So you're saying actually try to design it for a smaller student population intentionally to try and bring the cost down?
Yeah, because the next highest number is 478, and then it goes down from there. And this 491 is next year's class.
But I think for the grant, they're looking at the next 8 years, so it is included.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying, is that an option? Like, do we have to build to this because of the grant?
I don't know why we'd want to go smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Does our town,
I know
the
that
population.
12, 13 students.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that matters, but it really doesn't, because when you talk about, it could be 3 6th graders, 3 7th graders.
The classes
3
are still the
8th graders.
same.
It doesn't matter. Class size still has to, and then you're using this area at one time, this area at another time, and you can have a bigger class or a smaller class. So if we were talking 50, 60 kids, I would say definitely that, I don't think it would.
That's fair, and if that's the reason, I think we should be able to explain that, because we do see this, right, the numbers go down to almost 400, right? So I think that's something we should be aware of.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've got a couple questions.
Yeah, by all means.
So in your option 2 costs, you're using the same number for all your site improvements. Option 2, we kind of leave the field in the same, we do rotate it. So with that value should come down, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's one of those things, I think, as we go to the next iteration, yeah, maybe I think we would take a look at adjusting them so that you really get a clearer sense of things. Like I said, we wanted to kind of show more apples to apples comparison, but
Yep.
yeah, absolutely, we could take a look at.
The other thing I think with option 2, having the locker rooms not fully accessible, that's a no-go. That's got to get fixed.
There is an elevator there that gives you access. It would probably need to be upgraded. I agree that it's not.
I think when you get further, you'll see an opportunity to fix it.
Yeah.
Maybe not right now, but there's definitely ways to get around it.
Yeah. Yep.
In option 2 and 3, is the auditorium smaller than it is today?
No, I think the ed spec number, when Roger and I were talking,
It's close.
yeah, it's very close. The auditorium is actually appropriately sized, so we put in a number. We started, I think Roger from CSG started with the size of the existing auditorium, and as we looked at it, we felt it didn't make sense to change it, even if we did new.
And if you did new?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know in the ed spec it said something about 250 seat minimum, but it's currently like 460 seats.
Yeah, the square
Okay.
footage would certainly
footage is-
accommodate it. Yeah, there was
Okay.
a reduction made on the size of, the stage was a little bit larger. I think it was about 1,300. We suggested it be knocked back to 1,000 square feet because it's a code requirement. Once you get over 1,000 square feet, they want you to put in a standpipe and smoke evacuation, and it's a lot of unnecessary expense to go through.
I have another question about the auditorium. Right now, it has a sloped floor. Are there accessibility issues with that? And
yeah.
I guess in option 2, were you planning to make it flat or keep the raked floor?
I guess we hadn't really given that much thought as far as current accessibility code. I will have to look at it. I
Yeah.
don't know if the existing conditions report flagged it or
Yeah,
not.
I don't remember I don't think we've looked at what the slope is. I know there are things that can be done. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can change, part of it. There's also procedural things that can be done, as long as there is a path to accessible seating at the lowest level and the highest level. And, I know there were some operational things that could be done with a letter saying, if you had staff, on hand to assist people to get to other levels, that it would be acceptable.
We'll check that.
We
That's a
could
good
look at that.
question because
Yep.
that's a cost if we leave it to
Yep.
make it accessible. We have the existing drawings. We'll take a look.
The other thing I just wanted to commend you for is in the both the addition for option 2 and option 3. Like when we walked through this whole building last week, everybody noticed how dingy the hallways were. There's no natural light. It's pretty awful. But in both of your options, you've got windows at the ends of corridors, doors at the ends of corridors, the light wells. I think that's just a huge improvement.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? from the public?
Could we, this one had the amphitheater, obviously indoor. Was it option 3 had the amphitheater indoor, or was there an amphitheater space at all?
No, the amphitheater was incorrectly put indoors in the ed specs. It's been moved out.
Right, I'm saying on your design though for option 3 right now, did you have it sitting indoor for the time being, or then is it not incorporated at all within?
I think
No.
there was
now?
a space, is that what the space outside the media center is?
No, that
No.
there's a communicating kind of grand stair in the center there that is
Yeah.
intended to be kind of a bench seating, both a stair to get you up to the upper level, but also kind of bench seating for reading and lectures and, authors, visiting authors to give presentations. That wasn't the theater.
Right.
We had talked about putting the theater outside the,
It's a
Yeah.
great spot to put
But
it.
this would be an excellent spot to put it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Size-wise and program-wise, yeah.
Not to harp on it, but I wasn't here, sorry, the last meeting, but is it some kind of canopy thing, or is it just completely open to the outdoor?
I think
Probably
it was
small,
supposed to be completely open. The original idea was that I was going to face the back side of the auditorium, so there'd be a shared stage. So that the back end of the auditorium would open up to the backstage, and that stage area would be a stage
Oh.
area to the atrium, or to the
Yeah. Oh, okay.
amphitheater. But I think in this layout, that would not be possible, because you'd be sitting in the parking lot, so.
Yeah, we could look at that if
Could be
that's of
adjusted.
interest. Yeah, you're saying a dual, kind of dual purpose stage.
Actually, there's a little greenage there.
There's actually, you just need to nudge it out a little further.
Yeah.
Because that'd be kind of a really nice entry plaza if you could do that,
Yeah.
pull it off. So
Yeah,
we could
actually,
look
it
at
would
that.
be-
Yeah, because I was thinking for community needs, again, I don't know what the
Yeah.
genesis, honestly, for the amphitheater is, but for the students probably has good application, but from just a community more broadly,
Yeah.
having a concert series there or something. So, I know in the back it would be tempting, but we were saying trying to make the spaces that would be community accessible out front, so I guess it's
Yep.
just,
No, I agree.
have to weigh that.
All right, another question. So you had mentioned that you provision space for the all-gender restrooms. I didn't hear about the locker rooms. Maybe it was just didn't come up in conversation. But for option 3, those were built in.
They're there, yep.
Now, what about for option 2? You said we were going to stick with the same locker rooms we've got now. Is there space for the all-gender locker rooms there as well?
There's space because the existing lockers are, I believe, existing lockers slash shower slash offices are bigger than what's currently programmed at 450 square feet. So presumably there's room there if we were to kind of reinvent that space to put probably at least one on each level.
On each level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope everybody understands. I mean, the ed specs are what needs to be provided. So whether it's a combination of new space or existing and new, the same program needs to be provided throughout in either scheme, in any event.
Can you go back to that stoplight chart? I just want to see what your categories were again.
I'm sorry?
The red, yellow.
Oh,
green
the
chart.
red, yellow, green? Sure. I might have missed it, huh? Yeah, did I go the wrong way? Sorry about the duplicates. There we are.
Do you have something similar, comparing each option to the ed spec, as far as what we asked? Like, are we, like, what percentage of it are we going to comply with each of these options, type of thing?
Again, the ed spec would need to be met regardless of the scheme.
Okay.
So
I'm
I
just
don't
having a
think,
hard
I'm
time-
not sure it's really a comparison because no matter what, you have to.
I'm just having a hard time envisioning how you're going to meet it all with option 1. Like, how are you going to squeeze in the extra bathrooms, and how are you going to squeeze in all this other?
Won't be easy.
Well, I think.
But that was all taken into consideration with.
I think the ultimate,
estimates.
that's a good question, because I think the ultimate reality of option 1 is going to be that you can never reclaim the inefficiencies of that big loop. So either you're going to go over your maximum allowable to get those spaces in because of the inefficiency, which is likely the case, because it's very difficult to make an existing building as efficient as a new one.
Right.
So it's very likely that we'll go over the maximum allowable with just a renovate with option 1. Does that make
But
sense?
when you put your estimate together for option one, did you take all that into consideration?
I think there needs to be more homework done on option one,
It felt very low to me.
because of what you're bringing up. We were primarily focused on that, the larger renovated new and new, just to get those two close. And I kind of threw a curveball at Eddie this afternoon to make sure we show that one. So
Okay.
I think full disclosure that we have a little more homework to see what we can fit in that existing envelope and see what the implications are,
Yeah.
if that's an option. Because
think-
I ultimately think, and there's a couple caveats on those estimates, that those either renovate what you have or renovate as new with that addition are gonna get closer to the new as we start uncovering
Yeah.
and kind of shaking out the
Oh, that's
plan.
right.
And
Yeah, I didn't throw in that. One other one he did ask me, and I forgot to put in, was the sort of the contingency, if you will, the surprise factor.
I
for
feel
the-
like there's
yeah,
a lot of additional risk that goes into those first two
Yeah.
options that maybe we have to explore a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
you get unforeseen conditions, yeah. But yeah, to your point about, how do you get all those pieces in? I mean, that's exactly why, again, we kept an option two, while we kept the assembly spaces and not the classrooms, because, we've heard, obviously, there's a problem with, there's nowhere to have proper bathrooms, faculty space, special ed resource scattered throughout the building. There's just classrooms, and so trying to shoehorn them in is, it's not going to be.
we'll look at like your typical classrooms in this building, and we have the drawings and get like an average size as it exists today compared to what's in the ed spec, because that could also come into play. So if each one is, I don't know, 50 square feet over that, that's gonna start, because it doesn't really make that much sense to if you choose option one, to knock down all the walls in between the classrooms and kind of just move them over, 16 inches to get it to that.
Right.
You're most likely going to leave the classrooms the way they are.
That's why I kind of want to see where
Yeah.
we actually will land.
So
Compared to
we'll
the
do a
spec.
little bit
We can do
more
some more homework.
diagramming and homework
Yep.
on those square footages so that it's clear.
And then we had for example, we had the 3 large classrooms in our ed spec. I didn't see how that fit into option one.
So that's a good point. And the ed spec that was revised, I think, only has one now, 1,500 square foot.
No, we still have 3.
Yes, no, I just got it, I literally just got it later this afternoon.
Yeah.
I made copies. And, with the revisions to outdoor classrooms and everything else, they're only able to get, Eddie, Roger said you'd be able to speak about.
Yeah, I think what we were kind of going was to actually, instead of doing a larger classroom, was within each wing to have a pair of classrooms that had an operable partition between them, and understanding that, 2 classrooms combined together would give you that larger classroom. But, as Jeff was taking you through the breakout spaces, that was kind of the genesis of that, is having that, in addition to that partition that could join 2 classrooms, that you could have, a large space that's pretty close to that outside in the hallway that you could use for incidental learning spaces, on a regular basis without having to reconfigure anything.
So would that space be adequate, say, if you had to do training for all the 6th grade teachers and
Absolutely, yeah.
The way I look at, because I was thinking, of course, everything that Eddie and Jeff explained about the project-based learning component, and then obviously the research that shows when students show off their work, that's when they learn the most. So that was my thinking and Ian's thinking when we talked about those spaces. So as long as we can open up and still have those spaces, and then having that other space, the
Right.
amphitheater-like space, that would also provide the opportunity for students to show off their work and have families and community come in and actually see their presentation. So those purposes, all those other flexible spaces would provide for all those purposes, and then for training for adults and everything else, and then community spaces like that. So we wouldn't be losing out on anything. It did appear to that, and I had Ms. Cocchiola take a glance, and Mr. Latwinzik and Ms. O'Leary today to see if I was missing anything, and it seems like it would still meet all of our needs.
Do we have a copy of the latest ed spec?
No, we just got it, and literally, I don't, sleep, so I read it. And actually, there was no sleeping in between, because I just read it like at 4 o'clock, so.
Okay.
Um,
Were there any other major
the
changes?
POE. No, so I could tell you very quickly, those just came along, and I didn't even expect them until Friday. But then Roger and Ed were able to communicate.
So
and we were able to
what are we
communicate.
trading off for those spaces? If you're taking those 2 large rooms and making it one, is that the trade-off that we're gonna create these community spaces? Is that what the trade-off is?
Yeah, basically, I
And
think.
does that help with the circulation
That's
space?
exactly it, because as
Okay.
Roger and I were going through it, his concern was that, we didn't have enough space for circulation.
Yeah.
And so the whole point of having these breakout areas is really kind of doing a little bit of a double dip, because now you've got circulation space, but it gets to be used as program space at the same time.
So this is what, because I asked that question, like.
Do you have examples of that in other buildings? Like pictures of what that actually looks, is that what you, was that picture you showed with the green pillars? Is that what that is?
There's one physical example, I think, in Colchester, where it was at the end of a hallway of a
Like that?
grade
Oh.
level. This one,
Yep.
where that, is essentially circulation space. We took a portion of that and assigned it via the ed spec, but.
Well, is this like a hallway that they
Yeah,
just put
there's-
tables in the middle of it?
so, yes, there's a hallway, it's kind of a U shape, similar to the plan, except, yes, there's hallways on either side of where that class is. So,
Okay.
actually, I have a plan I can show you after.
Well, we're going to Colchester, right, Monday?
Monday.
So maybe
Oh, that's right.
particularly point that out for us, yeah.
Yep, that'd be good.
There's a few of those. So, yeah, it's kind of cheating a little bit, but not really, because you're trying to maximize, we call it the spaces in between. You want to maximize that use because you have to pay for it anyway. And you can kind of divide up the 83,000 any way you want, kind of, but you can't, if you go over it, then you're 100% out of pocket. So we're trying to balance all of that with all the programmatic spaces.
I mean, and this is obviously another type of way it can be done, by building, sort of widened parts of the hallway where there's, and whether it's fixed, tiered ceiling like this, or whether it's, more of a combination of soft seating and mobile furniture and that sort of thing. But there's, areas essentially ancillary to the circulation that you can see where there's space that can be carved out.
Can you go to where you have the auditorium and the cafeteria you can then kind of open up into double space? I'm having a hard time conceptualizing how
Is there an enlarged plan of that?
how those two areas can work together.
While he's handing those out, on the renovate new option, are there roof replacements required on the renovated areas? And if so, would we take a reimbursement hit? Have they had their 20-year life cycle?
Yeah, I believe, Tom, are there any roofs that are more recent than 20 years?
The newest ones are 2009.
Okay. So, yeah. So, yes. I mean, well,
Thank you.
I guess the question is, would you, any place where we're going to have to, revise a roof that it's less than 20 years, yes, there is, a little bit of a hit on the reimbursement.
And I can appreciate the time crunch that you guys are in to not be able to research everything that we're dealing with. But, I mean, if we take even $1 million hit, we're only talking between new and reno new of, $7 million? And so when you start taking hits of your reimbursement like that, those things add up. And as a follow-up, either one of you, were you tasked to do any type of a life cycling cost of operating cost over the period of 20 years for the whatever option we pick up?
Have we done that? No. We can take a look at that.
Well, I didn't know what your charge was. We weren't involved in that process, so I don't know if you were, I don't want to throw things on your plate that you're not obligated to do, But again, with a differential of only $7 million over a 20-year period, if you life cycle that out and the cost of a reno new, you don't have all the efficiencies that you're gonna have in new, that's, the taxpayer hit's gonna be a taxpayer hit, but if it's the same, why go reno? Is kind of where I'm going with that.
Understood. Our task was really purely conceptual design to give you test fits, but we can work with CSG to give them some data that we have. The east wing and the west classroom wing were 2010 PVC, so the two that go down the side here would have to be prorated. The one on the end is 2000 as far as the roof, so we'd be out of that.
We're talking about,
Roofs.
12 out of 20 then.
Yeah. So that's it. We'll add that, or at least a estimated cost on those options, so that because that's certainly going to come into play. That's a good point.
I'm just looking at it from the perspective, the closest that we can get the new versus the reno new figure, I think the easier it is for the committee and for the public to absorb that. If you're talking a $3 million difference between new, renovate new, or a $4 million difference over 20-year bonding or 25-year, I don't know what Cromwell does, but, you know, that's kind of where I'm going
And
with
if
all
the
that.
operating expenses pay for that delta within that time, then it's really kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
That goes along with my square footage question too, is that might reduce down that differential.
Right, trying to kind of narrow that gap, understood, yeah. All right, so Heather, you still have that question about the,
Yeah, I understand the concept of having the two spaces and a divider that can open it. I'm just trying to figure in my head, if you have an auditorium with a stage and seating, and then you open up the dividers or the wall and you have a cafeteria, what would you be doing with that space that opening up those walls would have an advantage?
Right. I'm assuming
Like
the auditorium is like what we have, like tiered seating, right? It's not just a flat with chairs that get brought in when you talk about an auditorium.
So that it could be a traditional auditorium, or it could be kind of a black box theater in the round. It's really, we show the footprint of the space. If we are gonna have a sloped seating and fixed seating, then we can start to show that. That, quite honestly, we wanted to ask that question because we weren't quite sure what direction we wanted to head there. So if that's the case, it doesn't really make that much sense to open up both.
right. So
Okay.
we understand. Yeah.
Okay,
Does
because
that
I was
answer your
just
question?
trying to like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 'cause
I saw where your
Those are-
brain was going with that.
Right,
I'm like,
right. I'm like, what? So you just people standing around in the back, like,
Right.
but
Well,
because I envisioned an auditorium like we have now. I mean, we do productions. The
Right,
middle school
yeah,
has a
yeah.
play.
Having the cafeteria
recitals.
open to like maybe the gymnasium, maybe that'd be more.
Right,
more
because if you did a
sense.
science fair, you could then
Right,
have
open both spaces up
both
together.
spaces, but it doesn't make sense
It's the auditorium now.
conceptually to
Yeah.
have those two.
Yeah,
It's fine
unless-
that they're next to each other, but I don't think putting in a partitioned wall that you can open has any benefit
Right.
whatsoever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we were, at least, we were under the mindset in that particular layout, it would be flat and you'd open it up and it could be a flexible space. But if you want traditional, it doesn't, yeah, I agree with you.
Right, and it
Yep.
was more like, yeah, if you had a community event where it was more of a lecture sort of thing where you needed to get more people in, not for a performance, really.
Any questions? The auditorium and the cafeteria? Any questions?
A separate entrance to the auditorium altogether. So people don't even have to go through the school to go to the auditorium for shows. I don't know. Brainstorming.
Can I ask, maybe for Dr. Macri? Yeah, the, sorry, is it okay now, okay? When, I know we talked about the student population, you know, whatever it shakes out to be, call it 480, say even 160, say, per grade, ideally. When you have 7 classrooms and then 2 sciences, are they concurrently, are 9 classroom spaces being occupied at once per grade, or the way you rotate the students are? I just want to try to figure out heads in a classroom at any one point in time.
Ms. Coach, based on our new schedule that we're proposing, did you hear that question?
Oh, I'm sorry, we were looking at.
No, that's okay. I can-
That's what I was doing. So just based on the new schedule that we're hoping to implement starting next year, with this, I know we wouldn't be able to do, the answer would be yes right now, except for, Matt, do you wanna read?
The question, oh yeah, I was just asking whether all, say there's, in the ed specs, it says 7 classrooms per grade, and then 2 science classrooms. Per grade, are all 9 classrooms being occupied concurrently? Okay, so, I mean, the head per class, I mean, I don't know, maybe some are bigger, I mean, we're near 20 people per class. That seems like I don't know, that seems reasonable to me.
I mean, I can answer that as to the 6th
Yeah.
grade, which I teach. We have 8 regular classrooms, 2 science, 2 social studies, 2 math, 2 language arts, and 1 special education classroom. So every grade has 9 classrooms. So even if you're going up or down 20 or 30 people, you can't take a classroom out.
Yeah, you can't, that's.
Right.
That's just what people think,
So-
the same as teachers too, right? They think, well, you have 20 or 30 less kids, but they're dispersed throughout the grade, and you have a certification, so you can't remove that teacher. It's the same thing with
Oh,
classes.
no, I'm not.
No,
The reason for my question is more, for scalability. I'm thinking more on the upside. If we end up having a student population of 500 or 510, can we say, okay, the headroom, there's 22 kids in a class, we can go to 25, and it's not the end of the world. I was just saying, do we have scalability on the upside?
No, I mean, I've gone up to 27, 28, depending, because there are bubbles within the year, and I've had
Okay.
as few as 18, so,
Yeah,
I mean, I
okay.
prefer the 18, but,
And
they
the
don't,
research says it
they don't
doesn't
ask me
have
that.
much of a big deal with
Yeah.
25. The place will disagree with me.
We'll have bigger numbers, so we have to keep that in mind. Our
Yeah.
STEM, robotics, our coding, our art, sometimes those classrooms can have as many as 20, in some years, depending upon, the size of the class, 28 to 30 students.
Well, I was just trying to think when you open up a wall or you open up spaces, you're not. It's not because no one's in that classroom right now,
Right.
because that class isn't in. So now you have half the number of students and twice the space. No, if you open that wall, well, now you're teaching a class to double the number of students.
Point well taken, so
Yeah.
I've lived that life once, where we ended up, and John's shaking his head because he knows what I'm talking about, a space that we were able to use for 2 classrooms with a partition, not in Cromwell.
Yeah.
And the numbers the huge store through the middle school brought back about 100 kids from out of the district that were going to magnet schools. So we brought back 100 kids. So we then had to say, these can't be 2 classrooms, use the partitions, open the doors, and then that entire room became 1 classroom. So that's a perfect example.
But you had an empty space.
We had an empty space.
Ah, right. Okay.
So you have to, everyone keeps saying, and I got the question last week, how are you preparing so that we don't have to build another school in 20 years? The best way that we can possibly do that is to think outside the box, to be as flexible as we can with spacing areas, so if something was to happen, we
Yeah.
could do it. Can we promise? We don't know. Even when you look at the way we're instructing, it looks completely different than it did 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
so 20 years from now, it could look completely different too. So we're doing our best. The best solution right now, and I think Tecton would agree, is trying to create as many flexible spaces as you possibly can without taking away the science lab or what you need for traditional spaces as well. Like, point well taken about the auditorium. Do we want a traditional auditorium? That's up to the community. Do we want a traditional auditorium? You ask me, I want what you want. Could we use the box space probably a little bit more? Yes, but then that would impact the arts component that we're trying to really reach when it comes to a play or incorporating the arts, drama. So you have to weigh the pros and the cons, is the way I look at it. But to answer your question, Matt, those spaces would be, that's a great reason why we should have them.
Yep. No, that's fine. Or just so all the classrooms are concurrently occupied within each grade level. Yeah. Okay.
And new space is going to attract new families to the town.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I look at this. The classrooms
Other
are.
classrooms don't attract.
Right. We don't want overcrowded, but I don't want to say, hey, we built this to 491 students. I want to make sure, can we handle that 492nd student? What's our real scale? Like if push came to shove, what's the max capacity
And you do
to be
have levels,
comfortable?
Matt. You're correct. And The enrollments have been projected from Peter Prada in the state of Connecticut for how many years? Forever, he does most of them. Once in a while, there's a blip. I lived through a blip of 100, no one expected that a magnet school would close and all the kids would come back to the home school. They thought, you would think they'd be distributed. But we only have 44 kids that go to magnets, so, and that's 44 throughout the entire district, but for us, we're a small district, and that's too much money, too many kids. But even if all of our middle school kids came back, I think there's 16 of them, we could fit them all in. So we don't have those big things to think about unless we build more homes.
We are building more homes.
Yep, we are.
Does the committee have any other questions? Jessica?
Just one last one. So since we're talking about costs, will we have a more, I'll say updated cost estimate before next week? Because I know that's when the vote is intended to happen on each of the options. So considering, what the surprise factor is for anything that's run out, we'll have updates.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not talking about wholesale changes, a few,
but just-
refreshes to have a little more accurate, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Some
will
of the
we
stuff that
also
Ken
be
brought
able
up
to
too.
have that estimate, I don't know who's going to do it, but for the longer term maintenance cost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question on the second floor on the renovation. It only shows one science class upstairs. I thought it was 2 per grade. The second floor,
Yeah,
there's only one science class and all the other pods, so to speak, have 2.
yeah, good catch. It should be next to the classroom that's floating out there. That looks a little odd by itself, so, because the other science room sits there, so it just wasn't shaded in.
the short wall.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to blame that one on Eddie, but I can't.
I didn't see it when I was proofreading it, so I think.
And then I guess, the central office spaces, right? I mean, that the central office is included in the scope of this project, right? Although it's a different spec, right? There's the ed spec, and that just deals with the offices for the middle school, but central office had a little 5 or 6 pager.
Yeah,
Do we need to kind of have that as part of this?
Yes.
I guess, right?
So in the renovate options, we show it located.
Yeah.
On the new, we didn't yet, we know what size it needs to be, because I wasn't quite sure, does it want to be connected to the new? Does it want to be freestanding? So we can have an offline conversation now. We'll show it, cost it for the new option. We have it shown and costed for the renovated.
I guess that was my only point, is for the new option, you're talking about 6,000-ish square feet at 500.
Yep.
It might add, several million more dollars.
Well, it has a separate budget and everything, the central office.
Right, so,
We'll separate out those costs, because it's a different reimbursement
Yeah.
rate too.
But it's still the 30,
Unless it's inside
if
the
it's
building.
new, it's still the 36 million or is
I mean,
it
it's still a
different
separate
costs?
grant, no matter what, but I mean, in
Like I'm
terms
saying, I
of
think,
Yeah.
I
trying
think
to
it's addition to
understand
that.
overall what the costs are, maybe we should have, I mean, it could be a below-the-line sort of thing, but we could have.
So what we'll do is we'll clean that up, and I think what's best is to pull it out, because it's gonna be a separate grant application.
Right.
Then we can total the two together, so the town knows, okay, here's the total package, but.
I'm saying right now, when you show the cost for option 3, right now, did that contemplate
It did not,
okay.
but, it has to be level set across all 3, because it was buried in the
Probably
option
1 and
2,
2.
but not in 1. So let us level set that.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And I think the preference is,
The cost, because it will probably be 4,000 to 5,000 square feet.
The ed spec was around 5,000, 5 or 6,000.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's a different cost, sorry, Doug. It's a different cost per square foot, because it's more office, less,
Oh, okay.
it's,
Right.
we'll
Yeah, it's
adjust
easier
that
to
and
build
show it.
office than it is classroom.
Yep.
I think the preference was for it to be attached, right? Yeah. that
Yeah, I
is
was
the
gonna say, I know
preference
what
is for it-
I know what your preference is.
The preference is that it's
You take the
attached.
kids away from me, I might lose my mind.
Right next to the band room, is that?
Next to the band room.
And so was my last office too.
Okay.
Put you on
that-
left feet.
that- All right, attached.
Put you on
If I may, through the chair, I know you guys are on an extraordinary time crunch on this, but is there any way that you could, like, any changes, updates, email it to Lisa on Tuesday? And then she can email it to the committee? This is a big decision, and the first blush to see it Wednesday night, if we could have a day to digest it at least, I think it would be
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's
I
crunch.
I completely understand, and yes, we'll get you a packet.
I mean, even if you have additional on Wednesday.
Yeah, I get
As
you.
much as you got on Tuesday, and you don't mind that, do you, Lisa? She gets it to you and blasts it out, does? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. My question was going to be exactly that, you know, what else would you want to see from us? What information do you need to have at your disposal to be actually able to make the decision next week?
My biggest thing is, you know, clarification on making sure that everything in the ed spec will go in that option 1. I think option 2, we're going to be there. Definitely option 3, but incorporating all that.
Is it okay to, if I run through my list of what I think our tasks are?
Sure.
Okay, so I just added, to make sure clarity, on option 1, we're going to verify the ed spec. If we need to add pieces, we will. We'll identify that in both the cost and in the plan. We're going to strive to get a package out, a PDF out on Tuesday. Central office is going to be attached to the new build. We're going to separate out those costs. We're going to add the second science room to the option 2, as noted. We're going to update, we're going to add the outdoor amphitheater just so that it's identified in the site plan. We're going to verify that we have incorporated all the costs in both the renovated new options. Life cycle costing, we'll coordinate with CSG. We're going to verify the existing auditorium slope, so that we can understand if that's ADA compliant. I have resolved soccer field somehow, so we can, I guess, take that offline. We have the property lines in the CAD. We'll strive to show them on the next option so you can see, but we're using GIS. We don't have a full survey. We're using your town GIS,
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's
hopefully
fine.
that's accurate. I have dual purpose indoor-outdoor stage, if that's something we need to continue with, and then fixed seat auditorium, so more traditional.
And separate out the central office and the cost estimates. Did you put that in there?
Yeah, separate
Yep.
out costs, got
Yeah,
it.
life cycle cost analysis, timeframes for the options. Trying to think. I had a
One
couple
more
others.
question. In the renovate as
I think I
new
may have had a
option,
couple others, but,
in like the auditorium stage gymnasium area besides locker rooms, there's no like restrooms. I'm just thinking, is that just because the plumbing doesn't exist now and that would be like more to add?
And the- Yeah, I took them away for the chorus, didn't I? Actually, they're gonna be up over and, good point, we'll add those. I gotta verify chorus, keyboard, band to make sure it's on the ed spec. That area, which is the area we're sitting in, gets a little bit messy, so I'll try to see if I can clean that up a little bit. I was looking at the structure. This isn't an easy space to try to modify. Okay.
Any other questions from the committee?
These total project costs include both the central office and the middle school, right? This is.
They will. They will.
They're all incorporated in the figures you presented us?
They're not.
That's for saying, no, they're,
No, only in option 2.
right, only an option 2, because it's talking about, you know, the renovation of the existing, so, yeah.
They're gonna add.
That's what we need to fix and make sure that they're equalized across all 3 options.
Thank you.
And will we get this presentation?
This presentation, I
Yeah,
guess?
Lisa has it if you want to distribute it, yeah.
I'm going to put it on the website. So, yeah, I'll send it to electronically right now, too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? I'd like to,
Oh, I was just gonna say, this is really great under the time constraints, and that might be what you're about to say, but thank you.
yes, thank you very much for pulling this together so quickly. I know it's a lot. Really appreciate the time to take this moment to invite Mrs. Cochiola. Do you have any questions? Okay. Selena, do you have any? She's still here? Oh, do you have any questions? Okay. And Dr. Macri, do you have any questions? Okay. All right.
Roseanne, can we add one thing to their list to look at?
Sure.
On the exit for the parent loop, right now, there's only one lane to exit. What happens is that people turning left or right get stuck. And it creates a lot of traffic congestion and anybody that's trying to left. So can we look at considering having 2 exit lanes, a left and a right turn, to maybe facilitate faster leaving speeds?
Yeah. Good point. Thank you. All right. No other comments? We can move on with our agenda. Thank you so much for the presentation, and again, taking the time to answer all our questions. This was obviously very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is the creation of a communication subcommittee. As I mentioned earlier with our meeting with the marketing group and Ira and Tall Timbers, it became really evident that a communication subcommittee is going to be needed. There's a lot of activities that we're going to have to do, maintaining website, maintaining Facebook page, tweeting, Instagram, whatever, social media in general. I do believe that we do need a communication subcommittee. So is there any discussion on the need for a communication subcommittee that we need to have, or anyone would like to propose a vote to create one?
A motion to create a communication subcommittee.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. With that, we do need to appoint a subcommittee chair and sub-team members. So do we have any nominations for a subcommittee chair? I can appoint someone. I can nominate someone, right? Chairperson can nominate someone. I nominate Shannon. Anyone want to second that?
I accept the nomination.
Anyone want to second the nomination?
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Okay. Are all in favor of Shannon leading the communication subcommittee? Say aye.
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 All opposed? Very good. Congratulations. You're our new subcommittee chairperson.
Or condolences.
Is there anyone interested in joining her on the communication subcommittee?
I'd be happy to join.
Jessica? Heather? Anyone else? All right, dream team right there. We have Ira's contact information. I think I sent it, but we'll send it again. I think I sent it to you. So we'll get hold of him, set up your meetings, and then the expectation is that these meetings you guys just provide, you ladies provide us an update as to what's been going on. Okay. And then also we're going to transfer ownership of the webpage, right? Okay.
Give it off to you.
Okay. Very good.
Is everything set up?
Okay. Very good. The only last thing here, reviewing the timeline. Any questions or issues with the timeline as presented from CSG?
Were there any changes that were made since the last time we looked? It looks like there's a little more content.
It replaced our discussions at the last meeting, once we had met with the county manager and the referendum, so it's just
Date on it.
those dates.
Any questions or any other discussion on the timeline? Heather?
Not specific to the timeline, because I believe it had it. But the other documents, like I know we send it out and it gets revised. Can we just, on our documents, have a footnote for when the revision date was? Because I have now like 7 of the same documents, and I don't know which one is the most current.
Right, can we add the date of the, can we add the date that they're revised to the file name?
Yeah,
The date's in the upper corner, and then I'll just add updated.
yeah, it's just
Or just to the
helpful.
file, because the way we have our file structures, it's hard to sort through it, so just add it.
Even like on the bylaws,
Yeah.
there've been a couple versions,
Yeah, right.
and stuff starts to
I know.
all gel together. So
Yeah.
it'd be helpful to have that revision
Revision-
date, just
revision
to
date.
make sure you're looking at. I'm making sure I'm looking at the
Latest.
the latest and greatest.
Yep. Yep, very good, good point. Any other comments, questions on the timeline? Okay, moving on. Last thing, comments, any updates or announcements of anything from anyone?
I just have a question, and I'm not sure if I got a 100% answer. So the website, that is your website. Am I allowed during this time to e-blast it to families just as a informational, because people have been asking where do we find information about, and it's on there. It's already on our website. There's a link to it.
yeah,
But
there's
I
a
am
link to
allowed,
it,
am
yeah.
I allowed to actually send it out to families and let everybody know, the community know?
I thought you works as informational only.
I thought so too, but I want to make sure I do everything right.
Do you know Karen? Is,
Oh, yes.
I wonder why.
We'll double check that.
Okay.
yeah, if there's like a rule sheet that we can follow, that'd be good. There's a lot of rules. Maybe Ira has that, guidelines, communication do's and don'ts.
I have one question too. Would we be able to get a copy of like the contracts or statement of work for the architect, for Tecton, and for CSG, just so to help clarify some of those roles? Like, would the committee be able to see those? Thank you.
Any other comments or questions or anything else anyone wants to bring up? If not, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have a good night. Thank you.